When you first get this combo, it can be confusing as to how to get it set up. Well, in this video, we are going to go ahead and set up the HEQ5 Pro and the ASI Air Pro, and we're starting right now. All right, to get started, when you first start setting up, you want to get your tripod legs pointed either north or south relative to where you live, and make sure the little N on the tripod is pointing towards your respective pole. It doesn't have to be exact, generally close is fine. And if you have a compass, maybe if you're not familiar with the area, you can use the compass to get you pointed in the right direction. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is screw in the spreader, and we're only going to go part way. So screw it in just enough that it's just barely starting to come through the top of the legs. And we're doing this so that way when you put the mount on, you're ready to screw it in the rest of the way. As you grab the mount to put it onto the legs, make sure the azimuth screws are unscrewed pretty far. That way it doesn't hit the little nub that the screws actually contact to help adjust left and right when you're doing your polar alignment. Now, if you don't unscrew those and you put it on top, when it hits that nub, it's gonna strip the screws a little bit, so make sure you make them as loose as possible. Once it's all in there, go ahead and screw in the spreader and make sure it's nice and tight, and then go to the bottom of the spreader and tighten up that as well. And as you go, spread the legs a little bit further and just get it nice and tight, so that way the base is nice and sturdy. That way if there's a little bit of a breeze or somebody bumps it, you know, say you're at a star party, it's not gonna move too much. It's nice and solid. All right, and the last thing we're gonna do here, now that the spreader is screwed in, is go ahead and adjust your altitude bolts so that way it lines up to roughly where you are in latitude. Now for me, at home, I am at roughly 40 degrees north, and that is at home, the observatories, it's rough. It's a little change here and there depending on where I am, but you want to get it close. It doesn't have to be exact. Like I said, this is just getting it close, and then after dark we'll fine tune it. But go ahead and screw those in, and then those azimuth screws, go ahead and evenly screw them. Try to get it as centered as possible and get it to contact that little nub on top of the tripod. Hi there, my name's Dalen here at Astro Escape. We go over all things astrophotography, starting from the very beginner level and working our way up from there, all to help you escape the day-to-day and image the night. If you're new here, if you like what you see as you're watching this video, please do consider giving this one a like. So the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and attach the counterweight. Now, you wanna put the counterweight on before you put anything else on, and the reasoning for that is just in case your locks fail, the telescope doesn't topple over and hit the tripod. So go ahead and make sure your locks are good to go, and then put the counterweight on. It doesn't have to be exactly where it needs to be. In fact, I recommend putting it a little bit lower than where it actually needs to be, just for setup. And the reasoning for that is it'll keep everything upright as you're putting all your stuff on. All right, after you have your counterweight on, we're gonna go ahead and get the telescope on. So for me, I develop a process so that way I know what I'm doing if I have to set up in the dark. I usually go telescope first, then the ASI Air and the guide scope and camera. It doesn't matter which, they both sit on the viewfinder spots for the telescope that I would use for visual if I was using this telescope for visual. And then I put the guide camera on. Now for the next step, you're gonna wanna put on your cables and make sure they're cable managed, so that way as you're balancing and as the mount is slewing, no cables get caught on anything. And for the last thing, make sure that you are generally close to where focus is. Now for the Zenith Star 61, it's generally around 37 on the little hash marks, on where it's pretty close. So if you put it out there, then when you do the next step, which is balancing, it'll turn out pretty accurate. So let's go over balancing. All right, with balancing, you're gonna wanna make sure that everything is as pretty even as possible, no matter how which lock you have unlocked. If you were to tilt it to the side, it doesn't move. Now there are some more advanced tricks where you actually make it slightly heavier on one side, but we're not gonna worry about that here. So to start off, let's go ahead and scoot the counterweight back up the pole just a little bit and unlock the locks and rebalance again. Now, as you can see in this clip here, it actually did sink a little bit and it was just heavy on one side. So readjust and do it again. And keep going until it's pretty even, just like you're seeing right now. The other side of that is we need to balance the right ascension. So if you unlock the RA lock and then just turn the telescope, you'll see that it'll either rotate back towards the camera side or the telescope side. And the easiest way to fix that is just unlock the mount where the telescope is and just slide it either up or down. So if it's camera heavy, slide it forward. If it's telescope heavy, slide it backwards. And then relock, and then rotate again, and then just let it go. And then once it's pretty balanced, it's not moving, you are done. All right, so the last thing we can do before it actually gets dark is set up the ASI Air. So once you're balanced, go ahead and turn everything on and grab the tablet or phone or however you control the ASI Air. All right, once you're in the app, if you are using a tablet out in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, you're gonna have to manually put in your latitude and longitude. So if you don't know the latitude and longitude of that place, definitely jot it down before heading out. If you're somewhere with service, it should be able to pick up GPS location and make sure everything is correct. Go ahead and set your latitude and longitude, and then change the telescope to whatever focal length you're using. So for the Zenithstar 61 is 360 millimeters, and then set the camera you're using, which it should auto detect each camera that's plugged into it. So you shouldn't really have to change, but if you do, go ahead and change it. All right, and because I'm not using the hand controller, I will go ahead and select EQmod mount. All right, once you're done with that, go ahead and hit enter, and it should bring you into the main interface. Hey, and question for you before we continue. What method do you use to connect your mount to the ASI Air? Do you use the hand controller and just a USB cable? Do you use the EQmod mount? What method do you use? Let me know down in the comments below. Let's start a discussion about it. Okay, so now we have to wait for it to get dark, and while we're waiting for it to get dark, wait until blue hour, you know, after the sun is down but it's not quite dark yet, and just find something way off in the distance, you know, maybe a radio tower or a house that's a couple miles away. It doesn't matter what it is, but just as soon as their lights kick on, turn it on their lights and start focusing there. And what we're looking for here is to get it generally close enough to focus. That way we can get the polar alignment done and then fine tune the focus after the polar alignment. So after you get your focus done using that, go ahead and put everything back to the home position, and then we're gonna go ahead and polar align. So for polar aligning, depending on your hemisphere, it might be a little bit different, but for me, I use the SynScanInit app, and this is for Android. I'm not sure if it's on Apple, so Apple users help me out here. But I use this, and basically what it does is it shows me what the reticule looks like in the Skywatcher mount, and then it pretty much puts Polaris where it needs to be at that date and time. Luckily, I do believe this works without having any cell service or GPS location because it pulls from the time and date data from your phone. The idea here is you see where it's supposed to be in the app, and then you adjust your Alt-Az bolts, so your altitude bolts and your azimuth bolts, and you get Polaris pretty much where it needs to be in the app. Now, it's not close enough for the ASI Air to consider it polar aligned, but it is pretty close. So after you have it polar aligned in the mount, then go ahead and go into the polar alignment in the app. Once you're in the app, go ahead and just say let's go, and it'll take a shot, and then it'll rotate your mount and then take another shot, and then from there you'll see these circles here and a little green circle inside that. The idea here is to hit a bullseye, so it takes some tweaking and getting used to with adjusting the bolts, but just remember, very small adjustments. Don't go cranking it 4 or 5 rotations at a time. It's gonna throw you way off. With the way these bolts are, I am talking just like a click, because if you adjust it just a little bit, it'll feel like a click. It's not really a click, but it'll feel like it. Just a click here and there, just a little rotation here and there of the azimuth bolts, and just get a feel for which way that green circle moves. This is purely trial and error. I cannot give you the best way to do this, but you're just gonna have to learn with that mount how little you need to move the screws. Generally, if you get it pretty close, the ASIAIR will call it good, but I am a perfectionist when it comes to the polar alignment, so I go straight for the bullseye. And sometimes it can take me about a half an hour to get this done. So polar aligning is probably one of the most frustrating parts of setup. Once you are done with polar alignment and the ASI Air gives you that nice green smiley face, you can go ahead and just slew it to whatever bright star is in the night sky for you. So you can go to Vega, Arcturus, Betelgeuse, Sirius. It doesn't matter which star it is as long as it's one of the bright stars in the sky for you at the time you are out there. And just go ahead and slew over to that star, and we're gonna go ahead and focus. So if you're using something like a William Optics telescope, or you bought a Bahtinov mask for your telescope, go ahead and put it on. Now, DSLR users, unplug your camera real quick and just set it to where you can see your LCD screen. If you can see your LCD screen, you can go ahead and focus and just watch the spike move as you focus. You want it dead center, and then go ahead and if you have an intervalometer, just take a couple shots with that and just make sure it actually is focused. For any ASI Air camera users, what you want to do is actually go into video mode in the ASI Air, and this pretty much works exactly like what I just said with the SLR users. This is probably the third video I've mentioned this with focus, and I'm trying to get this one clear here that DSLRs can't use video mode in the ASI Air, but ZWO cameras, this is probably the best way to focus if you don't have an autofocuser. Once you're focused, you can go ahead and slew over to your target for the night and get your program going. However, we will go over how to set that up in another video. If you found this video helpful, please do like, comment, and then maybe consider subscribing. I want to thank you for watching. Clear skies.